Tonight, we drift into a quieter world, where a silver shilling travels the wide world, bearing the scars of false suspicion, before finally returning home, where an old student's herbarium preserves the pressed flowers and memories of a vanished life, and where the golden bronze of a broken church bell sings forever in bronze for the poet it once welcomed. So close yours eyes, and let the stories carry you far away into the quiet of the night. The psyche, in the fresh morning dawn, in the rosy air, gleams a great star, the brightest star of the morning. His rays tremble on the white wall, as if he wished to write down on it what he can tell, what he has seen there and elsewhere during thousands of years in our rolling world. Let us hear one of his stories. A short time ago. The star's short time ago is called among men centuries ago. My rays followed a young artist. It was in the city of the popes, in the world city, Rome. Much has been changed there in the course of time, but the changes have not come so quickly as the change from youth to old age. Then, already, the palace of the Caesar was a ruin as it is now. Fig trees and laurels grew among the fallen marble columns, and in the desolate bathing halls, where the gilding still clings to the wall. The Colosseum was a gigantic ruin. The church bells sounded the incense, sent up its fragrant cloud, and through the streets marched processions with flaming tapers and glowing canopies. Holy Church was there, and art was held as a high and holy thing. In Rome lived the greatest painter in the world, Raphael. There also dwelt the first of sculptors, Michelangelo. Even the Pope paid homage to these two and honored them with a visit. Art was recognized and honored and was rewarded also. But for all that, everything great and splendid was not seen and known. In a narrow lane stood an old house. Once it had been a temple. A young sculptor now dwelt there. He was young and quite unknown. He certainly had friends, young artists like himself, young in spirit, young in hopes and thoughts. They told him he was rich in talent and an artist, but that he was foolish for having no faith in his own power. For he always broke what he had fashioned out of clay and never completed anything. And a work must be completed if it is to be seen and to bring money. You are a dreamer, they went on to say to him, and that's your misfortune. But the reason of this is that you have never lived. You have never tasted life. You have never enjoyed it in great, wholesome draughts as it ought to be enjoyed. In youth, one must mingle one's own personality with life that they may become one. Look at the great master Raphael, whom the Pope honors, and the world admires. He's no despiser of wine and bread, and he even appreciates the baker's daughter, the pretty Fornarina," added Angelo, one of the merriest of the young friends. Yes, they said a good many things of the kind, according to their age and their reason. They wanted to draw the young artist out with them into the merry wild life, the mad life, as it might also be called. And at certain times, he felt an inclination for it. He had warm blood, a strong imagination, and could take part in the merry chat and laugh aloud with the rest. But what they called Raphael's merry life disappeared before him like a vapor when he saw the divine radiance that beamed forth from the pictures of the great master, and when he stood in the Vatican before the forms of beauty which the masters had hewn out of marble thousands of years since his breast swelled, and he felt within himself something high, something holy, something elevating, great and good, and he wished that he could produce similar forms from the blocks of marble. He wished to make a picture of that which was within him, stirring upward from his heart to the realms of the infinite. But how and in what form? The soft clay was fashioned under his fingers into forms of beauty. But the next day, he broke what he had fashioned according to his wont. One day, he walked past one of those rich palaces of which Rome has many to show. He stopped before the great open portal and beheld a garden surrounded by cloistered walks. The garden bloomed with a goodly show of the fairest roses, great white lilies with green juicy leaves shot upward from the marble basin in which the clear water was splashing, and a form glided past the daughter of the princely house, graceful, delicate, and wonderfully fair. Such a form of female loveliness he had never before beheld. Yet stay, he had seen it painted by Raphael, painted as a psyche in one of the Roman palaces. Yes, there it had been painted, but here it passed by him in living reality. The remembrance lived in his thoughts, in his heart. He went home to his humble room and modeled a psyche of clay. It was the rich young Roman girl, the noble maiden, and for the first time he looked at his work with satisfaction. It had a meaning for him, for it was she. And the friends who saw his work shouted aloud for joy. They declared that this work was a manifestation of his artistic power, of which they had long been aware, and that now the world should be made aware of it too. The clay figure was lifelike and beautiful, but it had not the whiteness or the durability of marble. So they declared that the psyche must henceforth live in marble. He already possessed a costly block of that stone. It had been lying for years, the property of his parents, in the courtyard. fragments of glass, climbing weeds, and remains of artichokes had gathered about it and sullied its purity. But under the surface, the block was as white as the mountain snow. And from this block, the psyche was to arise. Now it happened one morning. The bright star tells nothing about this, but we know it occurred. That a noble Roman company came into the narrow lane. The carriage stopped at the top of the lane, and the company proceeded on foot towards the house to inspect the young sculptor's work, for they had heard him spoken of by chance. And who were these distinguished guests? Poor young man, or fortunate young man, he might be called. The noble young lady stood in the room and smiled radiantly when her father said to her, "It is your living image." That smile could not be copied any more than the look could be reproduced, the wonderful look which she cast upon the young artist. It was a fiery look that seemed at once to elevate and to crush him. "The psyche must be executed in marble," said the wealthy patrician. And those were words of life for the dead clay and the heavy block of marble, and words of life likewise for the deeply moved artist. "When the work is finished, I will purchase it," continued the rich noble. A new era seemed to have arisen in the poor studio. Life and cheerfulness gleamed there, and busy industry plied its work. The beaming morning star beheld how the work progressed. The clay itself seemed inspired, since she had been there, and molded itself in heightened beauty to a likeness of the well-known features. "Now I know what life is," cried the artist rejoicingly. "It is love. It is the lofty abandonment of self for the dawning of the beautiful in the soul. What my friends call life and enjoyment is a passing shadow. It is like bubbles among seething dregs, not the pure, heavenly wine that consecrates us to life." The marble block was reared in its place. The chisel struck great fragments from it. The measurements were taken. Points and lines were made. The mechanical part was executed, till gradually the stone assumed a human female form, a shape of beauty, and became converted into the psyche fair and glorious, a divine being in human shape. The heavy stone appeared as a gliding, dancing, airy psyche, with the heavenly, innocent smile, the smile that had mirrored itself in the soul of the young artist. The star of the roseate dawn beheld and understood what was stirring within the young man, and could read the meaning of the changing color of his cheek, of the light that flashed from his eye as he stood busily working, reproducing what had been put into his soul from above. "Thou art a master, like those masters among the ancient Greeks," exclaimed his delighted friends. "Soon shall the whole world admire thy psyche." "My psyche," he repeated. "Yes, mine. She must be mine. I too too am an artist, like those great men who are gone. Providence has granted me the boon, and has made me the equal of that lady of noble birth." And he knelt down and breathed a prayer of thankfulnesses to heaven. And then he forgot heaven for her sake, for the sake of her picture in stone, for her psyche, which stood there as if formed of snow, blushing in the morning dawn. How was to see her in reality, the living, graceful psyche, whose words sounded like music in his ears. He could now carry the news into the rich palace that the marble psyche was finished. He betook himself thither, strode through the open courtyard, where the waters ran splashing from the dolphin's jaws into the marble basins, where the snowy lilies and the fresh roses bloomed in abundance. He stepped into the great, lofty hall, whose walls and ceilings shone with gilding and bright colors and heraldic devices. Gaily dressed serving men, adorned with trappings like sleigh horses, walked to and fro, and some reclined at their ease upon the carved oak seats, as if they were the masters of the house. He told them what had brought him to the palace, and was conducted up a shining marble staircase covered with ouate carpets and adorned with many a statue. Then he went on through richly furnished chambers over mosaic floors amid gorgeous pictures. All this pomp and luxury seemed to weary him. But soon he felt relieved, for the princely old master of the house received him most graciously, almost heartily. And when he took his leave, he was requested to step into the signora's apartment, for she too wished to see him. The servants led him through more luxurious halls and chambers into her room, where she appeared the chief and leading ornament. She spoke to him. No hymn of supplication, no holy chant could melt his soul like the sound of her voice. He took her hand and lifted it to his lips. No rose was softer, but a fire thrilled through him from this rose. A feeling of power came upon him, and words poured from his tongue. He knew not what he said. Does the crater of the volcano know that the glowing lava is pouring from it? He confessed what he felt for her. She stood before him, astonished, offended, proud with contempt in her face, an expression of disgust, as if she had suddenly touched a cold, unclean reptile. Her cheeks reddened, her lips grew white, and her eyes flashed fire, though they were dark as the blackness of night. "Madman," she cried, "away, begone." And she turned her back upon him. Her beautiful face wore an expression like that of the stony countenance with the snaky locks. Like a stricken, fainting man, he tottered down the staircase and out into the street. Like a man walking in his sleep, he found his way back to his dwelling. Then he woke up to madness and agony, and seized his hammer, swung it high in the air, and rushed forward to shatter the beautiful marble image. But in his pain, he had not noticed that his friend Angelo stood beside him. And Angelo held back his arm with a strong grasp, crying, "Are you mad? What are you about?" They struggled together. Angelo was the stronger, and with a deep sigh of exhaustion, the young artist threw himself into a chair. "What has happened?" asked Angelo. "Command yourself. Speak." But what could he say? How could he explain? And as Angelo could make no sense of his friend's incoherent words, he forbore to question him further, and merely said, "Your blood grows thick from your eternal dreaming. Be a man as all others are, and don't go on living in ideals, for that is what drives men crazy. A jovial feast will make you sleep quietly and happily. Believe me, the time will come when you will be old, and your sinews will shrink. And then, on some fine, sunshiny day, when everything is laughing and rejoicing, you will lie there, a faded plant that will grow no more. I do not live in dreams, but in reality. Come with me. Be a man." And he drew the artist away with him. At this moment, he was able to do so, for a fire ran in the blood of the young sculptor. A change had taken place in his soul. He felt a longing to tear from the old, the accustomed, to forget, if possible, his own individuality. And therefore it was that he followed Angelo. In an out-of-the-way suburb of Rome lay a tavern much visited by artists. It was built on the ruins of some ancient baths. The great yellow citrons hung down among the dark, shining leaves and covered a part of the old reddish-yellow walls. The tavern consisted of a vaulted chamber, almost like a cavern in the ruins. A lamp burned there before the picture of the Madonna. A great fire gleamed on the hearth, and roasting and boiling was going on there. Without, under the citron trees and laurels, stood a few covered tables. The two artists were received by their friends with shouts of welcome. Little was eaten, but much was drunk, and the spirits of the company rose. Songs were sung, and ditties were played on the guitar. Presently, the saltarello sounded, and the merry dance began. Two young Roman girls, who sat as models to the artists, took part in the dance and in the festivity. Two charming bacchantes were they, certainly not psyches, not delicate, beautiful roses, but fresh, hearty, glowing carnations. How hot it was on that day! Even after sundown, it was hot. There was in the blood in every glance, everywhere. The air gleamed with gold and roses, and life seemed like gold and roses. "At last you have joined us for once," said his friends. "Now let yourself be carried by the waves within and around you. Never yet have I felt so well, so merry, cried the young artist. You are right. You are all right. I was a fool, a dreamer. Man belongs to reality and not to fancy. With songs and with sounding guitars. The young bull returned that evening from the tavern through the narrow streets. The two glowing carnations daughters of the Campagna went with them in Angelo's room. Among a litter of colored sketches, studies, and glowing pictures, the voices sounded mellower, but not less merrily. On the ground lay many a sketch that resembled the daughters of the Campagna in their fresh, hearty comeliness, but the two originals were far handsomer than their portraits. All the burners of the six-armed lamp flared and flamed, and the human flamed up from within and appeared in the glare as if it were divine. Apollo Jupiter. I feel myself raised to our heaven, to your glory. I feel as if the blossom of life were unfolding itself in my veins at this moment. Yes, the blossom unfolded itself and then burst and fell, and an evil vapor arose from it, blinding the sight, leading astray the fancy. The firework of the senses went out, and it became dark. He was again in his own room. There he sat down on his bed and collected his thoughts. Fie on thee. These were the words that sounded out of his mouth from the depths of his heart. Wretched man, go be gone. And a deep, painful sigh burst from his bosom. Away, be gone. These her words, the words of the living psyche, echoed through his heart, escaped from his lips. He buried his head in the pillows. His thoughts grew confused, and he fell asleep. In the morning dawn, he started up and collected his thoughts anew. What had happened? Had all the past been a dream? The visit to her, the feast at the tavern, the evening with the purple carnations of the Campagna. No, it was all real. A reality he had never before experienced. In the purple air gleamed the bright star, and its beams fell upon him and upon the marble psyche. He trembled as he looked at that picture of immortality, and his glance seemed impure to him. He threw the cloth over the statue and then touched it once more to unveil the form. But he was not able to look again at his own work, gloomy, quiet, absorbed in his own thoughts. He sat there through the long day. He heard nothing of what was going on around him, and no man guessed what was passing in this human soul. And days and weeks went by, but the nights passed more slowly than the days. The flashing star beheld him one morning as he rose pale and trembling with fever from his sad couch. Then he stepped towards the statue, threw back the covering, took one long, sorrowful gaze at his work, and then, almost sinking beneath the burden, he dragged the statue out into the garden. In that place was an old dry well, now nothing but a hole. Into this he cast the psyche through earth in above her, and covered up the spot with twigs and nettles. Away begone, such was the short epitaph he spoke. The star beheld all this from the pink morning sky, and its beam trembled upon two great tears upon the pale, feverish cheeks of the young man. And soon it was said that he was sick unto death, and he lay stretched upon a bed of pain. The convent, Brother Ignatius, visited him as a physician and a friend, and brought him words of comfort of religion, and spoke to him of the peace and happiness of the Church, of the sinfulness of man, of rest and mercy to be found in heaven. And the words fell like warm sunbeams upon a teeming soil. The soil smoked and sent up clouds of mist, fantastic pictures, pictures in which there was reality. And from these floating islands, he looked across at human life. He found it vanity and delusion. And vanity and delusion it had been to him. They told him that art was a sorcerer, betraying us to vanity and to earthly lusts, that we are false to ourselves, unfaithful to our friends, unfaithful towards heaven, and that the serpent was always repeating within us, "Eat, and thou shalt become as God." And it appeared to him as if now, for the first time, he knew himself and had found the way that leads to truth and to peace. In the church was the light and the brightness of God. In the monk's cell, he should find the rest through which the tree of human life might grow on into eternity. Brother Ignatius strengthened his longings, and the determination became firm within him. A child of the world became a servant of the church. The young artist renounced the world and retired into the cloister. The brothers came forward affectionately to welcome him, and his inauguration was as a Sunday feast. Heaven seemed to him to dwell in the sunshine of the church, and to beam upon him from the holy pictures and from the cross. And when in the evening, at the sunset hour, he stood in his little cell, and opening the window, looked out upon old Rome, upon the desolated temples, and the great dead Colosseum. When he saw all this in its spring garb, when the acacias bloomed, and the ivy was fresh, and roses burst forth everywhere, and the citron and orange were in the height of their beauty, and the palm trees waved their branches. Then he felt a deeper emotion than had ever yet thrilled through him. The quiet open Campagna spread itself forth towards the blue, snow-covered mountains, which seemed to be painted in the air, all the outlines melting into each other, breathing peace and beauty, floating, dreaming, and all appearing like a dream. Yes, that this world was a dream, and the dream lasts for hours and may return for hours. But convent life is a life of years, long years and many years. From within comes much that renders men sinful and impure. He fully realized the truth of this. What flames arose up in him at times! What a source of evil of that which we would not weld up continually! He mortified his body, but the evil came from within. One day, after the lapse of many years, he met Angelo, who recognized him. "Man," exclaimed Angelo, "yes, it is thou. Art thou happy now? Thou hast sinned against God, and cast away his boon from thee, hast neglected thy mission in this world. Read the parable of the entrusted talent. The master who spoke that parable spoke the truth. What hast thou gained? What hast thou found? Dost thou not fashion for thyself a religion and a dreamy life after thine own idea, as almost all do? Suppose all this is a dream, a fair delusion. Get thee away from me, Satan, said the monk, and he quitted Angelo. There is a devil, a personal devil. This day I have seen him, said the monk to himself. Once I extended a finger to him, and he took my whole hand. But now, he sighed, the evil is within me, and it is in yonder man. But it does not bow him down. He goes abroad with head erect and enjoys his comfort. And I grasped at comfort in the consolations of religion. If it were nothing but a consolation, supposing everything here were like the world I have quitted, only a beautiful fancy, a delusion, like the beauty of the evening clouds, like the misty blue of the distant hills. When you approach them, they are very different. O eternity, thou actest like the great calm ocean that beckons us and fills us with expectation. And when we embark upon thee, we sink, disappear, and cease to be. Delusion away with it begone, and tearless, but sunk in bitter reflection, he sat upon his hard couch, and then knelt down. Before whom? Before the stone cross fastened to the wall. No, it was only habit that made him take this position. The more deeply he looked into his own heart, the blacker did the darkness seem. Nothing within, nothing without. This life squandered and cast away. And this thought rolled and grew like a snowball until it seemed to crush him. I can confide my griefs to none. I may speak to none of the gnawing worm within. My secret is my prisoner. If I let the captive escape, I shall be his, and the God-like power that dwelt within him suffered and strove. O Lord, my Lord, he cried in his despair, be merciful and grant me faith. I threw away the gift thou hadst vouchsafed to me. I left my mission unfulfilled. I lacked strength, and strength thou didst not give me. Immortality, the psyche in my breast, away with it. It shall be buried like that psyche, the best gleam of my life. Never will it arise out of its grave. The star glowed in the roseate air, the star that shall surely be extinguished and pass away while the soul still lives on. Its trembling beam fell upon the white wall, but it wrote nothing. There upon being made perfect in God, nothing of the hope of mercy, of the reliance on the divine love that thrills through the heart of the believer. The psyche within can never die. Shall it live in consciousness? Can the incomprehensible happen? Yes, yes. My being is incomprehensible. Thou art unfathomable, O Lord. Thy whole world is incomprehensible, a wonderwork of power, of glory, and of love. His eyes gleamed, and then closed in death. The tolling of the church bell was the last sound that echoed above him, above the dead man, and they buried him, covering him with earth that had been brought from Jerusalem, and in which was mingled the dust of many of the pious dead. When years had gone by, his skeleton was dug up, as the skeletons of the monks who had died before him had been. It was clad in a brown frock. A rosary was put into the bony hand, and the form was placed among the ranks of other skeletons in the cloisters of the convent. And the sun shone without while within the censers were waved, and the Mass was celebrated. And years rolled by. The bones fell asunder and became mingled with others. Skulls were piled up till they formed an outer wall around the church, and there lay also his head in the burning sun. For many dead were there, and no one knew their names, and his name was forgotten also. And see, something was moving in the sunshine, in the sightless, cavernous eyes. What might that be? A sparkling lizard moved about in the skull, gliding in and out through the sightless holes. The lizard now represented all the life left in that head, in which once great thoughts, bright dreams, the love of art and of the glorious had arisen, whence hot tears had rolled down where hope and immortality had had their being. The lizard sprang away and disappeared, and the skull itself crumbled to pieces and became dust among dust. Centuries passed away. The bright star gleamed unaltered, radiant and large as it had gleamed for thousands of years, and the air glowed red with tints fresh as roses, crimson like blood. There where once had stood the narrow lane containing the ruins of the temple, a nunnery was now built. A grave was being dug in the convent garden for a young nun who had died and was to be laid in the earth this morning. The spade struck against a hard substance. It was a stone that shone dazzling white. A block of marble soon appeared. A rounded shoulder was laid bare, and now the spade was plied with a more careful hand, and presently a female head was seen, and butterflies' wings. Out of the grave in which the young nun was to be laid, they lifted in the rosy morning a wonderful statue of a psyche, carved in white marble. "How beautiful, how perfect it is," cried the spectators. "A relic of the best period of art." And who could the sculptor have been? No one knew. No one remembered him, except the bright star that had gleamed for thousands of years. The star had seen the course of that life on earth, and knew of the man's trials of his weakness. In fact, that he had been but human. The man's life had passed away. His dust had been scattered abroad, as dust is destined to be. But the result of his noblest striving, the glorious work that gave token of the divine element within him, the psyche that never dies, that lives beyond posterity. The brightness even of this earthly psyche remained here after him, and was seen and acknowledged and appreciated. The bright morning star in the roseate air threw its glancing ray downward upon the psyche, and upon the radiant countenances of the admiring spectators who here beheld the image of the soul portrayed in marble. What is earthly will pass away and be forgotten, and the stir in the vast firmament knows it. What is heavenly will shine brightly through posterity. And when the ages of posterity are past the psyche, the soul will still live on. The Metal Pig. In the city of Florence, not far from the Piazza del Granduca, runs a little street called Porta Rossa. In this street, just in front of the marketplace, where vegetables are sold, stands a pig made of brass and curiously formed. The bright color has been changed by age to dark green, but clear fresh water pours from the snout, which shines as if it had been polished. And so, indeed, it has for hundreds of poor people and children seize it in their hands as they place their mouths close to the mouth of the animal to drink. It is quite a picture to see a half-naked boy clasping the well-formed creature by the head as he presses his rosy lips against its jaws. Everyone who visits Florence can very quickly find the place. He has only to ask the first beggar he meets for the metal pig, and he will be told where it is. It was late on a winter evening. The mountains were covered with snow, but the moon shone brightly, and moonlight in Italy is like a dull winter's day in the north. Indeed, it is better, for clear air seems to raise us above the earth. while in the north, a cold gray leaden sky appears to press us down to earth, even as the cold, damp earth shall one day press on us in the grave. In the garden of the Grand Duke's palace, under the roof of one of the wings, where 1,000 roses bloom in winter, a little ragged boy had been sitting the whole day long. A boy who might serve as a type of Italy, lovely and smiling, and yet still suffering. He was hungry and thirsty, yet no one gave him anything. And when it became dark, and they were about to close the gardens, the porter turned him out. He stood a long time musing on the bridge which crosses the Arno, and looking at the glittering stars reflected in the water, which flowed between him and the elegant marble bridge della Trinita. I then walked away towards the metal pig, half knelt down, clasped it with his arms, and then put his mouth to the shining snout and drank deep draughts of the fresh water. Close by lay a few salad leaves and 2 chestnuts, which were to serve for his supper. No one was in the street but himself. It belonged only to him. So he boldly seated himself on the pig's back, leaned forward so that his curly head could rest on the head of the animal, and before he was aware, he fell asleep. It was midnight. The metal pig raised himself gently, and the boy heard him say quite distinctly, "Hold tight, little boy, for I am going to run." And away he started for a most wonderful ride. First, they arrived at the Piazza del Granduca, and the metal horse, which bears the Duke's statue, neighed aloud. The painted coats of arms on the old council house shone like transparent pictures, and Michelangelo's David tossed his sling. It was as if everything had life. The metallic groups of figures, among which were Perseus and the rape of the Sabines, looked like living persons, and cries of terror sounded from them all across the noble square by the Palazzo degli Uffizi in the arcade, where the nobility assemble for the carnival. The metal pig stopped. "Hold fast," said the animal. "Hold fast, for I am going upstairs." The little boy said not a word. He was half pleased and half afraid. They entered a long gallery where the boy had been before. The walls were resplendent with paintings. Here stood statues and busts, all in a clear light, as if it were day. But the grandest appeared when the door of a side room opened. The little boy could remember what beautiful things he had seen there, but tonight everything shone in its brightest colors. Here stood the figure of a beautiful woman, as beautifully sculptured as possible by one of the great masters. Her graceful limbs appeared to move. Dolphins sprang at her feet, and immortality shone from her eyes. The world called her the Venus de Medici. By her side were statues in which the spirit of life breathed in stone. Figures of men, one of whom whetted his sword and was named the Grinder. Wrestling gladiators formed another group. The sword had been sharpened for them, and they strove for the goddess of beauty. The boy was dazzled by so much glitter, for the walls were gleaming with bright colors. All appeared living reality as they passed from hall to hall. Beauty everywhere showed itself. And as the metal pig went step by step from one picture to the other, the little boy could see it all plainly. One glory eclipsed another, yet there was one picture that fixed itself on the little boy's memory, more especially because of the happy children it represented. For these, the little boy had seen in daylight. Many pass this picture by with indifference, and yet it contains a treasure of poetic feeling. It represents Christ descending into Hades. They are not the lost whom the spectator sees, but the heathen of olden times. The Florentine Angelo Bronzino painted this picture. Most beautiful is the expression on the face of the two children who appear to have full confidence that they shall reach heaven at last. They are embracing each other, and one little one stretches out his hand towards another who stands below him and points to himself as if he were saying, "I am going to heaven." The older people stand as if uncertain yet hopeful, and they bow in humble adoration to the Lord Jesus. On this picture, the boy's eyes rested longer than on any other. The metal pig stood still before it. A low sigh was heard. Did it come from the picture or from the animal? The boy raised his hands towards the smiling children, and then the pig ran off with him through the open vestibule. "Thank you, you beautiful animal," said the little boy, caressing the metal pig as it ran down the steps. "Thanks to yourself also," replied the metal pig. "I have helped you, and you have helped me, for it is only when I have an innocent child on my back that I receive the power to run. Yes, as you see, I can even venture under the rays of the lamp in front of the picture of the Madonna, but I may not enter the church, still from without. And while you are upon my back, I may look in through the open door. Do not get down yet, for if you do, then I shall be lifeless as you have seen me in the Porta Rossa. I will stay with you, my dear creature," said the little boy. So then they went on at a rapid pace through the streets of Florence till they came to the square before the church of Santa Croce. The folding doors flew open, and streamed from the altar through the church into the deserted square. A wonderful blaze of light streamed from one of the monuments in the left side aisle, and 1,000 moving stars seemed to form a glory round it. Even the coat of arms on the tombstone shone, and a red ladder on a blue field gleamed like fire. It was the grave of Galileo, The monument is unadorned, but the red ladder is an emblem of art, signifying that the way to glory leads up a shining ladder on which the prophets of mind rise to heaven, like Elias of old, in the right aisle of the church. Every statue on the richly carved sarcophagi seemed endowed with life. Here stood Michelangelo. There, Dante with the laurel wreath round his brow. Alfieri and Machiavelli. For here, side by side, rest the great men, the pride of Italy. The church itself is very beautiful, even more beautiful than the marble cathedral at Florence, though not so large. It seemed as if the carved vestments stirred, and as if the marble figures they covered raised their heads higher to gaze upon the brightly colored glowing altar, where the white-robed boys swung the golden censers amid music and song, while the strong fragrance of incense filled the church and streamed forth into the square. The boy stretched forth his hands towards the light, and at the same moment the metal pig started again, and so rapidly that he was obliged to cling tightly to him. The wind whistled in his ears. He heard the church door creak on its hinges as it closed, and it seemed to him as if he had lost his senses. Then a cold shudder passed over him, and he awoke. It was morning. The metal pig stood in its old place on the Porta Rossa, and the boy found he had slipped nearly off its back. Fear and trembling came upon him as he thought of his mother. She had sent him out the day before to get some money. He had not done so, and now he was hungry and thirsty. Once more, he clasped the neck of his metal horse, kissed its nose, and nodded farewell to it. Then he wandered away into one of the narrowest streets where there was scarcely room for a loaded donkey to pass. A great iron-bound door stood ajar. He passed through and climbed up a brick staircase with dirty walls and a rope for a balustrade, till he came to an open gallery hung with rags. From here, a flight of steps led down to a court where from a well water was drawn up by iron rollers to the different stories of the house, and where the water buckets hung side by side. Sometimes the roller and the bucket danced in the air, splashing the water all over the court. Another broken-down staircase led from the gallery, and two Russian sailors, running down it, almost upset the poor boy. They were coming from their nightly carousal. A woman, not very young, with an unpleasant face and a quantity of black hair, followed them. "What have you brought home?" she asked when she saw the boy. "Don't be angry," he pleaded. "I received nothing. I have nothing at all." And he seized his mother's dress and would have kissed it. Then they went into a little room. I need not describe it, but only say that there stood in it an earthen pot with handles made for holding fire, which in Italy is called a marito. This pot she took in her lap, warmed her fingers, and pushed the boy with her elbow. "Certainly, you must have some money," she said. The boy began to cry, and then she struck him with her foot till he cried out louder. "Will you be quiet, or I'll break your screaming head?" And she swung about the fire pot, which she held in her hand, while the boy crouched to the earth and screamed. Then a neighbor came in, and she had also a marito under her arm. "Felicita," she said, "what are you doing to the child?" "The child is mine," she answered. "I can murder him if I like, and you too, Giannina." And then she hung about the fire pot. The other woman lifted up hers to defend herself, and the two pots clashed together so violently that they were dashed to pieces, and fire and ashes flew about the room. The boy rushed out at the sight, sped across the courtyard, and fled from the house. The poor child ran till he was quite out of breath. At last he stopped at the church, the doors of which were opened to him the night before, and went in. Here everything was bright, and the boy knelt down by the first tomb on his right, the grave of Michelangelo, and sobbed as if his heart would break. People came and went. Mass was performed, but no one noticed the boy, excepting an elderly citizen who stood still and looked at him for a moment, and then went away like the rest. Hunger and thirst overpowered the child, and he became quite faint and ill. At last he crept into behind the marble monuments and went to sleep. Towards evening, he was awakened by a pull at his sleeve. He started up, and the same old citizen stood before him. "Are you ill? Where do you live? Have you been here all day?" were some of the questions asked by the old man. After hearing his answers, the old man took him home to a small house close by in a back street. They entered a glovemaker's shop, where a woman sat sewing busily. A little white poodle, so closely shaven that his pink skin could plainly be seen, frisked about the room and gamboled upon the boy. "Innocent souls are soon intimate," said the woman, as she caressed both the boy and the dog, and these good people gave the child food and drink, and said he should stay with them all night, and that the next day the old man, who was called Giuseppe, would go and speak to his mother. A little homely bed was prepared for him, but to him, who had so often slept on the hard stones, it was a royal couch, and he slept sweetly, and dreamed of the splendid pictures, and of the metal pig. Giuseppe went out the next morning, and the poor child was not glad to see him go, for he knew that the old man was gone to his mother, and that perhaps he would have to go back. He wept at the thought, and then he played with the little lively dog and kissed it, while the old woman looked kindly at him to encourage him. And what news did Giuseppe bring back? At first the boy could not hear, for he talked a great deal to his wife, and she nodded and stroked the boy's cheek. Then she said, "He is a good lad. He shall stay with us. He may become a clever glove maker like you. Look what delicate fingers he has got." Madonna intended him for a glove maker, so the boy stayed with them, and the woman herself taught him to sew. And he ate well, and slept well, and became very merry. But at last he began to tease Bellissima, as the little dog was called. This made the woman angry, and she scolded him and threatened him, which made him very unhappy. And he went and sat in his own room, full of sad thoughts. This chamber looked upon the street, in which hung skins to dry, and there were thick iron bars across his window. That night he lay awake, thinking of the metal pig. Indeed, it was always in his thoughts. Suddenly, he fancied he heard feet outside, going pit-a-pat. He sprung out of bed and went to the window. Could it be the metal pig? But there was none to be seen. Whatever he had heard had passed already. Next morning, their neighbor, the artist, passed by carrying a paint box and a large roll of canvas. "Help the gentleman to carry his box of colors," said the woman to the boy, and he obeyed. Instantly, took the box, and followed the painter. They walked on till they reached the picture gallery, and mounted the same staircase up which he had ridden that night on the metal pig. He remembered all the statues and pictures, the beautiful marble Venus, and again he looked at the Madonna with the Savior and Saint John. They stopped before the picture by Bronzino, in which Christ is represented as standing in the lower world with the children smiling before him in the sweet expectation of entering heaven. And the poor boy smiled too, for here was his heaven. "You may go home now," said the painter, while the boy stood watching him till he had set up his easel. "May I see you paint?" asked the boy. "May I see you put the picture on this white canvas?" "I am not going to paint yet," replied the artist. Then he brought out a piece of chalk. His hand moved quickly, and his eye measured the great picture. And though nothing appeared but a faint line, the figure of the Savior was as clearly visible as in the colored picture. "Why don't you go?" said the painter. Then the boy wandered home silently and seated himself on the table and learned to sew gloves. But all day long his thoughts were in the picture gallery, and so he pricked his fingers and was awkward. But he did not tease Bellissima. When evening came and the house door stood open, he slipped out. It was a bright, beautiful starlight evening, but rather cold. Away he went through the already deserted streets, and soon came to the metal pig. He stooped down and kissed its shining nose, and then seated himself on its back. "You happy creature," he said, "how I have longed for you. We must take a ride tonight." But the metal pig lay motionless, while the fresh stream gushed forth from its mouth. The little boy still sat astride on its back when he felt something pulling at his clothes. He looked down, and there was Bellissima, smooth shaven. Bellissima, barking as if she would have said, "Here I am too. Why are you sitting there?" A fiery dragon could not have frightened the little boy so much as did the little dog in this place. Bellissima in the street, and not dressed, as the old lady called it. What would be the end of this? The dog never went out in winter unless she was attired in a little lambskin coat which had been made for her. It was fastened round the little dog's neck and body with red ribbons, and was decorated with rosettes and little bells. The dog looked almost like a little kid when she was allowed to go out in winter and trot after her mistress. And now, here she was in the cold and not dressed. Oh, how would it end? All his fancies were quickly put to flight. Yet he kissed the metal pig once more, and then took Bellissima in his arms. The poor little thing trembled so with cold that the boy ran homeward as fast as he could. "What are you running away with there?" asked two of the police whom he met, and at whom the dog barked. "Where have you stolen that pretty dog?" they asked, and they took it away from him. "Oh, I have not stolen it. Do give it to me back again," cried the boy despairingly. "If you have not stolen it, you may say at home that they can send to the watch house for the dog." Then they told him where the watch house was, and went away with Bellissima. Here was a dreadful trouble. The boy did not know whether he had better jump into the Arno or go home and confess everything. They would certainly kill him, he thought. "Well, I would gladly be killed," he reasoned, "for then I shall die and go to heaven." And so he went home, almost hoping for death. The door was locked, and he could not reach the knocker. No one was in the street, so he took up a stone and with it made a tremendous noise at the door. "Who is there?" asked somebody from within. "It is I," said he. "Bellissima is gone. Open the door, and then kill me." Then indeed there was a great panic. Madame was so very fond of Bellissima. She immediately looked at the wall where the dog's dress usually hung, and there was the little lambskin. "Bellissima in the watch house," she cried. "You bad boy, how did you entice her out? Poor little delicate thing, with those rough policemen, and she'll be frozen with cold." Giuseppe went off at once, while his wife lamented, and the boy wept. Several of the neighbors came, and amongst them the painter. He took the boy between his knees and questioned him, and in broken sentences he soon heard the whole story, and also about the metal pig, and the wonderful ride to the picture gallery, which was certainly rather incomprehensible. The painter, however, consoled the little fellow and tried to soften the lady's anger. But she would not be pacified till her husband returned with Bellissima, who had been with the police. Then there was great rejoicing, and the painter caressed the boy and gave him a number of pictures. Oh, what beautiful pictures these were! Figures with funny heads, and above all, the metal pig was there too. Oh, nothing could be more delightful. By means of a few strokes, it was made to appear on the paper, and even the house that stood behind it had been sketched in. Oh, if he could only draw and paint. He who could do this could conjure all the world before him. The first leisure moment. During the next day, the boy got a pencil, and on the back of one of the other drawings, he attempted to copy the drawing of the metal pig, and he succeeded. Certainly, it was rather crooked, rather up and down one leg, thick, and another thin. Still, it was like the copy, and he was overjoyed at what he had done. The pencil would not go quite as it ought. He had found that out. But the next day, he tried again. A second pig was drawn by the side of the first, and this looked 100 times better. And the third attempt was so good that everybody might know what it was meant to represent. And now, the glove-making went on but slowly. The orders given by the shops in the town were not finished quickly, for the metal pig had taught the boy that all objects may be drawn upon paper, and Florence is a picture book in itself for anyone who chooses to turn over its pages. On the Piazza della Trinità stands a slender pillar, and upon it is the goddess of justice, blindfolded with her scales in her hand. She was soon represented on paper, and it was the glovemaker's boy who placed her there. His collection of pictures increased, but as yet they were only copies of lifeless objects, when one day Bellissima came gambolling before him. "Stand still," cried he, "and I will draw you beautifully to put amongst my collection." But Bellissima would not stand still, so she must be bound fast in one position. He tied her head and tail, but she barked and jumped, and so pulled and tightened the string that she was nearly strangled. And just then, her mistress walked in. "You wicked boy, the poor little creature," was all she could utter. She pushed the boy from her, thrust him away with her foot, called him a most ungrateful, good-for-nothing, wicked boy, and forbade him to enter the house again. Then she wept and kissed her little half-strangled Bellissima. At this moment, the painter entered the room. In the year 1834, there was an exhibition in the Academy of Arts at Florence. Two pictures placed side by side attracted a large number of spectators. The smaller of the two represented a little boy sitting at a table drawing. Before him was a little white poodle, curiously shaven. But as the animal would not stand still, it had been fastened with a string to its head and tail to keep it in one position. The truthfulness and life in this picture interested everyone. The painter was said to be a young Florentine who had been found in the streets when a child by an old glove maker who had brought him up. The boy had taught himself to draw. It was also said that a young artist, now famous, had discovered talent in the child, just as he was about to be sent away for having tied up Madame's favorite little dog and using it as a model. The glove-maker's boy had also become a great painter, as the picture proved. But the larger picture by its side was a still greater proof of his talent. It represented a handsome boy, clothed in rags, lying asleep, and leaning against the metal pig in the street of the Porta Rossa. All the spectators knew the spot well. The child's arms were round the neck of the pig, and he was in a deep sleep. The lamp before the picture of the Madonna threw a strong, effective light on the pale, delicate face of the child. It was a beautiful picture. A large gilt frame surrounded it, and on one corner of the frame, a laurel wreath had been hung. But a black band twined a scene among the green leaves, and a streamer of crape hung down from it. For within the last few days, the young artist had died. The bond of friendship. We've recently made a little journey, and already we want to make a longer one. Where to Sparta, or Mycenae, or Delphi? There are hundreds of places whose names make the heart pound with the love of travel. On horseback, we climb mountain paths through shrubs and brush. A single traveler looks like a whole caravan. He rides in front with his guide. A pack horse carries luggage tent and provisions. A couple of soldiers guard the rear for his protection. No inn with soft beds awaits him at the end of a tiring day's journey. Often, the tent is his roof in nature's great wilderness, and the guide cooks him his supper, a pilau of rice fowl and curry. Thousands of gnats swarm around the little tent. It is a miserable night, and tomorrow the route will head across swollen streams. Sit tight on your horse, lest you are washed away. What reward is there for these hardships? The greatest, the richest nature reveals herself here in all her glory. Every spot is history. Eye and mind alike are delighted. The poet can sing of it, the painter portray it in splendid pictures, but neither can reproduce the air of reality that sinks deep into the soul of the spectator and remains there. The lonely herdsman up on the hills could perhaps, by the simple story of an event in his life, open your eyes, and with a few words, let you behold the land of the Hellenes, better than any travel book could do. Let him speak, then, about a custom, a beautiful, peculiar custom. The shepherd in the mountains will tell about it. He calls it the bond of friendship, and relates our house was built of clay, but the doorposts were fluted marble pillars found on the spot where the house was built. The roof almost reached the ground. Now it was black-brown and ugly, but when it was new, it was covered with blooming oleander and fresh laurel branches fetched from beyond the mountains. The walks around our house were narrow. Walls of rock rose steeply up, bare and black in color. On top of them, clouds often hung like white living beings. I never heard a bird sing here, and never did the men dance here to the sound of the bagpipe. But the place was sacred from olden times. Its very name reminded of that, for it was called Delphi. The dark, solemn mountains, all covered with snow. The brightest, which gleamed in the red evening sun, the longest, was Parnassus. The brook close by our house rushed down from it, and was also sacred long ago. Now the donkey makes it muddy with its feet, but the current rolls on and becomes clear again. How well I remember every spot and its deep sacred solitude. In the middle of the hut, a fire was lit, and when the hot ashes lay high and glowing, the bread was baked in it. If the snow was piled up high round our hut and almost covered it, then my mother seemed to be her brightest. She would hold my head between her hands, kiss my forehead, and sing the songs she never sang at other times. For our masters, the Turks, did not like them. And she sang, "On the summit of Olympus, in the fir tree forest, lived an old stag. Its eyes were heavy with tears. It wept red, yes, and even green and light blue tears. Then a roebuck came by and said, 'What ails you that you cry so that you weep red-green, yes, even light blue tears?' The stag replied, 'The Turk has entered our city. He has fierce dogs for the hunt, a goodly pack. I will drive them away across the islands,' said the young roebuck. 'I will drive them away across the islands into the deep sea.' But before evening, the roebuck was slain, and before nightfall, the stag was hunted and killed. When my mother sang this, her eyes became moist, and a tear hung on the long lashes. But she concealed and turned our black bread in the ashes. Then I would clench my fists and say, 'We'll kill the Turks.' But she repeated the word of the song, 'I will drive them across the islands into the deep sea.' But before evening, the roebuck was slain, and before nightfall, the stag was hunted and killed. For several days and nights, we had been alone in our hut. And then my father came. came home. I knew he would bring me seashells from the Gulf of Lepanto, or maybe even a sharp, gleaming knife. But this time, he brought us a child, a naked little girl, whom he had carried under his sheepskin coat. She was wrapped in a fur, but when this was taken off, and she lay in my mother's lap, all that she possessed was 3 silver coins fastened in her dark hair. And Father explained to us that the Turks had killed her parents, and told us so much about it that I dreamed about it all night. Father himself had been wounded, and my mother dressed his arm. His wound was deep, and the thick sheepskin was stiff with blood. The little girl was to be my sister. She was so beautiful, with clear, shining eyes. Even my mother's eyes were not gentler than hers. Yes, Anastasia, as they called her, was to be my sister, for her father was united to mine, united in accordance with an old custom we still keep. They had sworn brotherhood in their youth, and had chosen the most beautiful and virtuous girl in the whole country to consecrate their bond of friendship. I had often heard of the queer and beautiful custom, so now the little girl was my sister. She sat in my lap. I brought her flowers and feathers of the field birds. We drank together of the waters of Parnassus, and slept head to head beneath the laurel roof of the hut, while many a winter my mother sang of the red, the green, and the light blue tears. But still, I didn't understand. It was my own countrymen, whose thousand-fold sorrows were reflected in those tears. One day, 3 Frankish men came dressed differently than we were. They had their tents and beds packed on horses, and more than 20 Turks, armed with swords and muskets, accompanied them, for they were friends of the Pasha and carried letters from him. They only came to view our mountains, to climb Parnassus through snow and clouds, and to see the strange, steep, black rocks surrounding our hut. There was no room for them inside our home, nor could they stand the smoke rolling along the ceiling and out at the low door. So they pitched their tents in the narrow clearing outside our house, roasted lambs and birds, and drank strong, sweet wine, which the Turks did not dare to drink. When they left, I went with them for some distance, and my little sister hung in a goatskin on my back. One of the Frankish gentlemen had me stand before a rock and sketched me and her, so lifelike as we stood there, so that we looked like one being. I had never thought of it before, but Anastasia and I were really one person. She was always sitting in my lap or hanging on my back in the goatskin, and when I dreamed, she appeared in my dreams. 2 nights later, other men came to our hut armed with knives and muskets. They were Albanians, brave men, said my mother. They stayed only a short while wrapping tobacco in strips of paper and smoking it. My sister Anastasia sat on the knees of one of them, and when he was gone, she had only 2 silver coins in her hair instead of 3. The oldest of the men talked about which route they should take. He was not sure. "If I spit upward," he said, "it will fall in my face. If I spit downward, it will fall in my beard." But they had to make a choice, so they went, and my father followed them. And soon afterwards, we heard the sound of shots. The firing increased. Then soldiers rushed into our hut and took my mother, myself, and Anastasia prisoners. The robbers, they said, had stayed with us, and my father had gone with them. Therefore, we had to be taken away. Soon I saw the robbers' corpses, and I saw my father's corpse too, and I cried myself to sleep. When I awoke, we were in prison, but the cell was no worse than the room in our hut. And they gave me onions to eat, and musty wine poured from a tarred sack. But ours at home was no better. I don't know how long we were held prisoners, but many days and nights went by. It was our holy Easter time when we were released. I carried Anastasia on my back, for my mother was ill and could only walk slowly, and it was a long way down to the sea, to the Gulf of Lepanto. We entered a church, magnificent, with pictures on a golden background. They were pictures of angels, oh, so beautiful. But I thought our little Anastasia was just as beautiful. In the center of the floor was a coffin filled with roses. The Lord Christ is symbolized there as a beautiful rose, said my mother. And then the priest chanted, "Christ is risen." Everybody kissed each other. All the people had lighted tapers in their hands. I received one, and so did little Anastasia. The bagpipes played, men danced hand in hand from the church, and the women outside were roasting the Easter lamb. We were invited to share it. And when I sat by the fire, a boy older than I put his arms around my neck, kissed me, and cried, "Christ is risen." Thus we met for the first time, Aphtanides and I. My mother could make fishing nets, which gave her a good income here in the bay. So, for a long time, we lived beside the sea, the beautiful sea that tasted like tears, and whose colors reminded me of the song of the weeping stag. For its waters were sometimes red, sometimes green, and then again light blue. Aphtanides knew how to guide a boat, and I often sat in it with Anastasia while it glided through the water like a cloud over the sky. Then, as the sun set and the mountains turned a deeper and deeper blue, one range seemed to rise behind the other, and behind all of them was Parnassus, covered with snow. Its summit gleamed in the evening rays like glowing iron, and it seemed as though the light shone from within it. for long after the sun had set, the mountain top still glittered in the clear blue shimmering air. The white seabirds touched the water's surface with their wings, and indeed, everything here was as calm as among the black rocks at Delphi. I was lying on my back in the boat, while Anastasia leaned against my chest, and the stars above shone more brightly than our church lamps. They were the same stars, and they were in exactly the same position above me as when I had sat outside our hut at Delphi, and at last I imagined I was still there. Then there was a splash in the water, and the boat rocked violently. I cried out loud, for Anastasia had fallen overboard, but just as quickly, Aphtanides had leaped in after her, and soon he lifted her up to me. We undressed her, wrung the water out of her clothes, and then dressed her again. Aphtanides did the same for himself. We remained on the water until their clothes were dry, and no one knew about our fright over the little adopted sister, in whose life Aphtanides also now had a part. Then it was summer. The sun blazed so fiercely that the leaves on the trees withered. I thought of our cool mountains and their fresh water streams, and my mother longed for them too. So one evening, we journeyed home. How quiet it was, and how peaceful. We walked on through the high thyme, still fragrant, though the sun had dried its leaves. Not a shepherd did we meet. Not a single hut did we pass. Everything was quiet and deserted. Only a shooting star told us that in heaven there still was life. I do not know if the clear blue air glowed with its own light, or if the rays came from the stars, but we could plainly make out the outlines of the mountains. My mother lit a fire and roasted the onions she had brought with her. Then my sister and I slept among the thyme, with no fear of the wolf or the jackal, not to mention fear of the ugly, fire-breathing Smidraki. For my mother sat beside us, and this, I believed, was enough. When we reached our old home, we found the hut a heap of ruins and had to build a new one. A couple of women helped my mother, and in a few days the walls were raised and covered with a new roof of oleander. My mother braided many holsters of bark and skins. I tended the priest's little flock, and Anastasia and the little tortoises were my playmates. One day, we had a visit from our dear Aphtanides, who said how much he had longed to see us. He stayed with us for 2 whole days. A month later, he came again to tell us he was taking a ship for Corfu and Patras, but had to bid us goodbye first. He had brought our mother a large fish. He talked a great deal, not only about the fishermen out in the Gulf of Lepanto, but also of the kings and heroes who had once ruled Greece, just as the Turks rule it now. I have seen a bud on a rosebush develop through the days and weeks into a full blooming flower before I was even aware how large, beautiful, and blushing it had become. And now I saw the same thing in Anastasia. She was now a beautiful, full-grown girl, and I was a strong youth. I myself had taken from the wolves that fell before my musket the skins that covered my mother's and Anastasia's beds. Years had passed. Then one evening, Aftanides returned strong, brown, and slender as a reed. He kissed us all and had many stories to tell of the great ocean, the fortifications of Malta, and the strange tombs of Egypt. It all sounded wonderful, like a priestly legend, and I looked at him with a kind of awe. "How much you know," I said. "How well you can tell about it. But after all, you once told me about the most wonderful thing," he said. "You told me something that has never been out of my thoughts. The grand old custom of the bond of friendship. A custom I want very much to follow. Brother, let us go to church as your and Anastasia's fathers did before us. Your sister is the most beautiful and innocent of girls. She shall consecrate us. No nation has such beautiful old customs as we Greeks." Anastasia blushed like a fresh rose, and my mother kissed Aftanides. An hour's walk from our house, where loose earth lies on the rocks, and a few scattered trees give shade, stood the little church, a silver lamp hanging before its altar. I wore my best clothes. The white fustanella fell in rich folds over my hips. The red jacket fitted tight and snug. The tassel on my fez was silver, and in my girdle gleamed my knife and pistols. Aftanides wore the blue costume of the Greek sailors. On his chest hung a silver medallion with a figure of the Virgin Mary, and his scarf was as costly as those worn by rich men. Everyone could see that we two were going to some ceremony. We entered the little empty church, where the evening sunlight streaming through the door gleamed on the burning lamp and the colored pictures on the golden background. We knelt on the altar steps, and Anastasia stood before us. A long white garment hung loosely and lightly over her graceful figure. On her white neck and bosom, a chain of old and new coins formed a large collar. Her black hair was fastened in a single knot and held together by a small cap fashioned of gold and silver coins that had been found in the old temples. No Greek girl had more beautiful ornaments than she. Her face beamed, and her eyes were bright as two stars. The three of us prayed silently, and then she asked us, "Will you be friends in life and in death?" "Yes," we replied. "Will each of you? Whatever may happen, remember, my brother is a part of me. My secrets are his secrets. My happiness is his happiness. Self-sacrifice, patience. Every virtue in me belongs to him as well as to me. Then she placed our hands together and kissed each of us on the forehead. And again we prayed silently. Then the priest came through the door behind the altar and blessed the three of us. The singing voices of other holy men sounded from behind the altar screen. The bond of eternal friendship was completed. When we arose, I saw that my mother, standing by the church door, was weeping tenderly. How cheerful it was now in our little hut by the springs of Delphi. The evening before his departure, Aphtanides sat with me on the mountainside, his arm around my waist, mine around his neck. We spoke of the suffering of Greece and of the men the country could trust. Every thought of our souls was clear to each of us, and I took his hand. One thing more you must know. One thing that till this moment only God and I have known. My whole soul is filled with a love stronger than the love I feel for my mother and for you. And whom do you love? Asked Aphtanides, his face and neck turning red. I love Anastasia, I said. And then his hand trembled in mine, and he turned pale as a corpse. I saw it and understood, and I also believe my hand trembled. I bent toward him, kissed his brow, and whispered, I have never told her this. Maybe she doesn't love me. Consider this, brother. I've seen her daily. She has grown up by my side, grown into my soul. And she shall be yours, he said. Yours, I cannot lie to you, nor will I. I love her too, but tomorrow I go. In a year we shall meet again, and then you will be married, won't you? I have some money of my own. It is yours. You must and shall take it. Silently we wandered across the mountain. It was late in the evening when we stood at my mother's door. She was not there. But as we entered, Anastasia held the lamp up, gazing at Aphtanides with a sad and beautiful look. Tomorrow you're leaving us, she said. How it saddens me, saddens you, he said. And I thought that in his voice there was a grief as great as my own. I couldn't speak, but he took her hand and said, Our brother there loves you. Is he dear to you? His silence is the best proof of his love. Anastasia trembled and burst into tears. Then I could see no one but her, think of no one but her. I threw my arms around her and said, Yes, I love you. She pressed her lips to mine, and her arms slipped around my neck. The lamp had fallen to the ground, and all about us was dark, dark, as in the heart of poor dear Aphtanides. Before daybreak, He got up, kissed us all goodbye, and departed. He had given my mother all his money for us. Anastasia was my betrothed, and a few days later, she became my wife. The silver shilling. There was once a shilling, which came forth from the mint springing and shouting, "Hurrah! Now I am going out into the wide world." And truly, it did go out into the wide world. The children held it with warm hands, the miser with a cold and convulsive grasp, and the old people turned it about. Goodness knows how many times, while the young people soon allowed it to roll away from them. The shilling was made of silver. It contained very little copper, and considered itself quite out in the world when it had been circulated for a year in the country in which it had been coined. One day, it really did go out into the world, for it belonged to a gentleman who was about to travel in foreign lands. This gentleman was not aware that the shilling lay at the bottom of his purse when he started, till he one day found it between his fingers. "Why," cried he, "here is a shilling from home. Well, it must go on its travels with me now." And the shilling jumped and rattled for joy. When it was put back again into the purse, here it lay, among a number of foreign companions who were always coming and going, one taking the place of another. But the shilling from home was always put back, and had to remain in the purse, which was certainly a mark of distinction. Many weeks passed, during which the shilling had traveled a long distance in the purse without in the least knowing where he was. He had found out that the other coins were French and Italian, and one coin said they were in this town, and another said they were in that, but the shilling was unable to make out or imagine what they meant. A man certainly cannot see much of the world if he is tied up in a bag, and this was really the shilling's fate. But one day, as he was lying in the purse, he noticed that it was not quite closed, and so he slipped near to the opening to have a little peep into society. He certainly had not the least idea of what would follow, but he was curious, and curiosity often brings its own punishment. In his eagerness, he came so near the edge of the purse that he slipped out into the pocket of the trousers. And when, in the evening, the purse was taken out, the shilling was left behind in the corner to which it had fallen. As the clothes were being carried into the hall, the shilling fell out on the floor, unheard and unnoticed by anyone. The next morning, the clothes were taken back to the room. The gentleman put them on and started on his journey again. But the shilling remained behind on the floor. After a time, it was found, and being considered a good coin, was placed with 3 other coins. "Ah," thought the shilling, "this is pleasant. I shall now see the world become acquainted with other people and learn other customs." "Do you call that a shilling?" said someone the next moment. "That is not a genuine coin of the country. It is false. It is good for nothing." Now begins the story as it was afterwards, related by the shilling himself. "False good for nothing," said he. That remark went through and through me like a dagger. I knew that I had a true ring, and that mine was a genuine stamp. These people must at all events be wrong, or they could not mean me. But yes, I was the one they called false and good for nothing. "Then I must pay it away in the dark," said the man who had received me. So I was to be got rid of in the darkness, and be again insulted in broad daylight. False, good for nothing. Oh, I must contrive to get lost, thought I, and I trembled between the fingers of the people every time they tried to pass me off slyly as a coin of the country. Ah, unhappy shilling that I was! Of what use were my silver, my stamp, and my real value here, where all these qualities were worthless? In the eyes of the world, a man is valued just according to the opinion formed of him. It must be a shocking thing to have a guilty conscience and to be sneaking about on account of wicked deeds. As for me, innocent as I was, I could not help shuddering before their eyes whenever they brought me out, for I knew I should be thrown back again up the table as a false pretender. At length, I was paid away to a poor old woman who received me as wages for a hard day's work. But she could not again get rid of me. No one would take me. I was to the woman a most unlucky shilling. "I am positively obliged to pass this shilling to somebody," said she. "I cannot, with the best intentions, lay by a bad shilling. The rich baker shall have it. He can bear the loss better than I can. But after all, it is not a right thing to do." "Ah," sighed I to myself, "am I also to be a burden on the conscience of this poor woman? Am I then, in my old days, so completely changed?" The woman offered me to the rich baker, but he knew the current money too well, and as soon as he received me, he threw me almost in the woman's face. She could get no bread for me, and I felt quite grieved to the heart that I should be cause of so much trouble to another, and be treated as a cast-off coin. I who, in my young days, felt so joyful in the certainty of my own value, and knew so well that I bore a genuine stamp. I was as sorrowful now as a poor shilling can be when nobody will have him. The woman took me home again with her, and looking at me very earnestly, she said, "No, I will not try to deceive anyone with thee again. I will bore a hole through thee, that everyone may know that thou art a false and worthless thing. And yet, why should I do that? Very likely, thou art a lucky shilling. A thought has just struck me that it is so, and I believe it. Yes, I will make a hole in the shilling, said she, and run a string through it, and then give it to my neighbor's little one to hang round her neck as a lucky shilling. So she drilled a hole through me. It is really not at all pleasant to have a hole bored through one, but we can submit to a great when it is done with a good intention. A string was drawn through the hole, and I became a kind of medal. They hung me round the neck of a little child, and the child laughed at me and kissed me, and I rested for one whole night on the warm, innocent breast of a child. In the morning, the child's mother took me between her fingers and had certain thoughts about me, which I very soon found out. First, she looked for a pair of scissors and cut the string. Lucky shilling, said she. Certainly, this is what I mean to try. Then she laid me in vinegar till I became quite green. And after that, she filled up the hole with cement, rubbed me a little to brighten me up, and went out in the twilight hour to the lottery collector to buy herself a ticket with a shilling that should bring luck. How everything seemed to cause me trouble. The lottery collector pressed me so hard that I thought I should crack. I had been called false. I had been thrown away. That I knew. And there were many shillings and coins with inscriptions and stamps of all kinds lying about. I well knew how proud they were, so I avoided them from very shame. With the collector were several men who seemed to have a great deal to do, so I fell unnoticed into a chest among several other coins. Whether the lottery ticket gained a prize, I know not. But this I know, that in a very few days after I was recognized as a bad shilling and laid aside, everything that happened seemed always to add to my sorrow. Even if a man has a good character, it is of no use for him to deny what is said of him, for he is not considered an impartial judge of himself. A year passed, and in this way I had been changed from hand to hand, always abused, always looked at with displeasure, and trusted by no one. But I trusted in myself and had no confidence in the world. Yes, that was a very dark time. At length, one day, I was passed to a traveler, a foreigner, the very same who had brought me away from home. And he was simple and true-hearted enough to take me for current coin. But would he also attempt to pass me? And should I again hear the outcry, "False, good for nothing"? The traveler examined me attentively. "I took thee for good coin," said he. Then suddenly a smile spread all over his face. I have never seen such a smile on any other face as on his. "Now this is singular," said he. "It is a coin from my own country." a good, true shilling from home. Someone has bored a hole through it, and people have no doubt called it false. How curious that it should come into my hands. I will take it home with me to my own house. Joy thrilled through me when I heard this. I had been once more called a good, honest shilling, and I was to go back to my own home, where each and all would recognize me and know that I was made of good silver and bore a true, genuine stamp. I should have been glad in my joy to throw out sparks of fire, but it has never at any time been my nature to sparkle. Steel can do so, but not silver. I was wrapped up in fine, white paper that I might not mix with the other coins and be lost. And on special occasions, when people from my own country happened to be present, I was brought forward and spoken of very kindly. They said I was very interesting, and it was really quite worthwhile to notice that those who are interesting have often not a single word to say for themselves. At length, I reached home. All my cares were at an end. Joy again overwhelmed me. For was I not good silver? And had I not a genuine stamp, I had no more insults or disappointments to endure. Although indeed, there was a hole through me as if I were false. But suspicions are nothing when a man is really true. And everyone should persevere in acting honestly, for and will be made right in time. That is my firm belief, said the shilling. The old church bell in the quiet pastoral heart of Württemberg in Germany, where the roads are lined with slender acacias that sway in the wind, and the apple and pear trees bow down beneath their jeweled harvest, there lies a little town named Marbach. It rests upon the green banks of the river Neckar, whose silver waters rush swiftly by, past vineyards and ancient watchtowers, past weathered castles and sleepy villages, until at last it finds its way into the mighty Rhine. It was late in autumn. The air was cool and restless. The vine leaves hung heavy and mottled, flushed with red, deep amber, and gold. The sky wept often, and the rain fell in slow, cold curtains across the fields, while a sharp wind came moaning through the naked branches. It was not gentle weather for the poor. The days shortened swiftly, and the gray of dusk lingered like sorrow over the land. Within the little houses, with their narrow windows and steep gables, the light burned faintly. One such house stood at the edge of the road, its walls warped with age, its roof crooked and uneven. To a passer-by, it would have seemed mean and humble, yet within those walls dwelt hearts rich in faith and reverence. It was there, one stormy November evening, that God's blessing came in secret. As the mother lay in pain, the great bell of the church tower began to ring a bright, festive sound that poured through the wind and the rain like a promise. The chime filled the small dwelling with trembling joy, when amid those jubilant notes, a son was born. Prayer and thanksgiving rose together with the tolling of the bell, until it seemed as though heaven itself were singing. The newborn child opened his eyes, a spark of gold beneath the lamp's dim glow, and the father wrote in the family Bible, "On the 10th of November, 1759, God sent us a son." Later, when the priest baptized him, he added the names John Christopher Frederick. No one in Marbach, no neighbor, no friend, not even the bell that had first rejoiced for him, could have dreamed that this poor child would one day sing the song of the bell itself. The boy grew like the river by which he was born, swift, bright, and deepening with every mile. When he was still small, his parents left Marbach to live in another town, yet their hearts clung to their old home, and on fair days, the mother would take her son to visit it again. He was then 6 years old, a quiet child with clear blue eyes and hair the color of wheat in sunlight. He could already recite psalms and Bible tales, and in the evenings he sat beside his father, listening to stories from Gellert's Fables or Klopstock's Messiah. His sister, 2 years older, would often weep beside him when their father read of Christ's passion, tears that burn but purify, as children's tears often do. When they returned to Marbach, the little town seemed unchanged. The crooked house with its pointed gable still stood. The cobbled streets whispered beneath their feet as before. But in the churchyard, new graves had grown where grass once lay. And there, close to the old wall, stood something that made the mother pause. The ancient church bell, itself now cracked and silent, resting low in the grass and nettles. Its voice, which had called to christenings and weddings, tolled for funerals, and warned of fire, had fallen still. The mother told her son how in that very hour, when the bell last sang for joy, he had come into the world. The child listened gravely. He ran his small hand over the cold bronze, bent down, and kissed it, a gesture of innocent reverence that his mother never forgot. Though the bell was broken, its music lived on in the boy's heart. Through the long years of poverty that followed, through hunger, study, and sorrow, he carried its echo within him. The child grew tall and slender, with freckled cheeks and hair of reddish gold. His gaze was bright, curious, and far away, like one who listens to something no one else can hear. He studied hard and rose through the ranks at the military school, where order ruled like iron. There he wore stiff collars and powdered hair, and was known by the command, "March, halt, front." The days were strict and cold, yet within him the bell still rang. Its old melody murmured through his dreams, through his loneliness, and through the endless drills in the courtyard. Years passed. The bell in Marbach grew rusted, forgotten, beneath moss and rain. But the bell within the young man's soul began to sound louder than ever. It sang of freedom, of truth, of man's dignity and courage. It called him to rebel against smallness and fear. When he wrote his first words pages that trembled with passion, the rhythm of the bell guided his hand. One night, while the capital blazed with festival lights and rockets painted the sky, he wept in secret. His dreams had driven him to flee from duty, from the barracks, from his homeland. He carried nothing but hope and a few pages of a play called Fiesco. Exhausted, he hid in a poor tavern in a foreign land where laughter rang and tankards clashed, while he, thin, feverish, and unknown, scribbled verses about liberty and love. Yet even there, in misery, the bell's echo followed him. The old bell, meanwhile, lay silent by the churchyard wall, battered by the years. The wind that swept across the graves seemed to whisper its story, the joy of birth, the music of faith, the stillness of decay. But destiny had not finished its circle. Long after the bell was sold, as scrap metal, hauled away from Marbach, melted in a Bavarian foundry, and forgotten once more. Yet fate weaves its marvels quietly. For in the royal city of Bavaria, when metal was needed to cast a monument to one of Germany's greatest sons, the molten bronze of that very bell was chosen. And far away in Denmark, in a land of beech woods and burial mounds, another poor boy was born who wore wooden shoes and carried his father's dinner through the shipyards. That boy, Bertel Thorvaldsen, became the sculptor whose hands shaped immortality. From his clay arose the bronze bust of the man whose name had once been written in a poor man's Bible, John Christopher Friedrich Schiller. When the statue was unveiled in Stuttgart, 100 years had passed since the old bell had rung for the poet's birth. The city was bright with banners, and the air trembled with the sound of bells. One, however, remained silent, the old bell itself, now transformed. Yet the sunlight shone upon its surface, gleaming on the noble brow of Schiller's image. And thus the circle closed. The bell that had once celebrated a poor child's first cry now sang forever in bronze for the immortal poet he became. Its voice had crossed from sound to spirit, from sorrow to song, and from the fleeting to the eternal. A rose from Homer's grave, all across the lands of the East. Every song and every whisper beneath the moon tells of the eternal love between the nightingale and the rose. In the deep star-lit hours when the gardens are silent and the air itself seems to listen, the nightingale pours out his heart to the fragrant queen of flowers. His wings tremble with passion as he sings, and his music floats through the jasmine-scented night, tender and sorrowful, like a prayer woven from sound and longing. Not far from ancient Smyrna, where the merchant leads his solemn caravan through the pine-clad paths, their camels bending proud necks under the weight of silks and spices, there stands a hedge of wild roses. The ground there is sacred, touched by the breath of forgotten gods and the footsteps of poets long returned to dust. In those high boughs above the road, a gentle turtle dove makes her dwelling, her feathers glinting in the sun like the inside of a seashell, soft and opaline. And beneath those trees, amidst the fragrance of pine and earth, there blooms a rose more radiant than all her sisters, a blossom of such perfection that even the morning dew seemed unworthy to rest upon her petals. To her the nightingale sang. Night after night his song rose like incense into the quiet heavens, songs of love, of hope, of yearning. He sang of the joy that lives only to suffer, of beauty that withers even as it blooms. His melody trembled through the twilight, yet the rose remained still and silent. Not a single dewdrop gathered on her leaves to mirror his sorrow. She stood proud and distant, her fragrance like a queen's perfume, beautiful, untouchable, and cold. At last, when his voice grew faint from unreturned devotion, the rose bent her head toward a small mound of stones beside the path. Her soft voice rustled like wind through petals. Here, she said, rests the greatest singer the world has ever known. Over his tomb shall I breathe my perfume, and upon it shall my leaves fall when storms scatter them. He who once sang of Troy became earth, and from that earth I have sprung. I am a rose from the grave of Homer, born of immortal dust. Shall I then open my heart to a nightingale, however sweet his voice? And so the proud flower turned away. The nightingale, hearing her words, sang one last song, a song so pure and full of sorrow that the air itself seemed to tremble. When the final note faded, his little heart broke and he fell lifeless among the stones. A caravan passed by soon after, merchants with their camels and dark-skinned servants, the bells on the animals tinkling faintly in the still heat. Among them was a child, the son of the camel driver. Seeing the fallen bird, he knelt and cradled it gently in his hands. The boy's eyes were wide with wonder as he laid the songster to rest within the grave of the ancient poet. Then the child went on his way, and the rose trembled in the soft wind, her leaves shivering as though she wept without tears. Evening came. The sun sank behind the mountains, staining the horizon, crimson, as if the sky itself had bled. The rose folded her petals, close like hands clasped in prayer, and drifted into a dream. In her dream, the world was golden with sunlight. A group of travelers approached strangers from faraway lands who had come on a pilgrimage to honor the grave of Homer. Among them was a minstrel from the north, a land of glaciers and silent forests where the aurora paints the sky with living light. He bent over the rose, marveling at her beauty, and plucked her carefully. Between the pages of his book, he placed her, whispering, from the grave of Homer. He carried her across the seas to his distant homeland, where the air was cold and the nights endless. There, in his home of mist and music, he opened his book and gazed at her faded petals with reverence. The rose, though pressed and lifeless, felt his breath upon her, and thought she could still hear the faint echo of his words. She faded with grief, dreaming always of her warm Asiatic home, and yet proud to lie between the leaves of a poet's work. Then she awoke from that dream. The dawn wind stirred her petals, and a single drop of dew, clear as a tear, fell upon the mound that held the nightingale's bones. The sun rose higher, casting its fire upon the garden, and once more the rose lifted her head. Never had she been so lovely. The warmth of the morning filled her with a strange peace, as though love and sorrow had both been transformed into light. The day grew long and hot. The air quivered over the stones, and then footsteps again. Pilgrims, like those she had seen in her vision, came walking softly through the sacred place. Among them was another poet from the distant north. His eyes were kind, and when he saw her, he smiled, as though he had found something both holy and familiar. He plucked the rose, gently pressed his lips upon her fragrant heart, and carried her away toward the realm of clouds and northern lights. There she now lies, embalmed between the pages of his Iliad, a fragile relic of the South, a blossom born of Homer's dust. And when he opens the book, his voice murmurs softly, just as she once dreamed. Here is a rose from the grave of Homer, and though no breath stirs her. Now, though her petals are dry and still deep within the hush of eternity, the rose still listens, and the nightingale still sings. The snail and the rosebush. Around the quiet garden ran a living hedge of hazelnut bushes, their green leaves whispering softly in the wind. Beyond them stretched the meadows where cows grazed lazily and sheep dotted the distant hills like bits of moving cloud. In the very heart of the garden, where the sun lingered longest, stood a proud rosebush. Every spring it dressed itself in blossoms pink and red and white, and filled the air with fragrance. Beneath its branches, on the warm soil, dwelt a snail, who carried not only his house upon his back, but, as he liked to say, his entire world within. "Wait until my time comes," murmured the snail one golden afternoon. "When it does, you'll see wonders beyond mere roses or nuts or milk. I am destined for something greater, something inward, something profound. I shall look forward to it," said the rosebush, kindly shaking her petals in the breeze. "But may I ask, friend snail, when that time shall be?" "I am in no hurry," replied the snail, withdrawing a little into his spiral home. "You roses are always rushing to bloom, to fade, to begin again. There is a wisdom in haste. Depth requires silence and waiting, and so the seasons turned. The next year, when the air grew soft, again, the rosebush was once more covered with buds, and beneath it, in almost the same patch of sunlight, lay the snail. He crept halfway out of his shell, stretched his horns toward the light, then pulled them back in again. "Everything is exactly as before," he said, with quiet disdain. "The rosebush blooms, the field hums, the sheep bleat. No progress, no elevation, only repetition. What a dull performance life puts on for those who watch too closely." Summer ripened. Autumn came, and frost kissed the last blossoms. The rosebush still offered roses until buried its roots. The snail, unimpressed, sank into the earth to sleep. Another year dawned, and again the garden awoke. The rosebush sent up new shoots, the dew shone, and the snail reappeared, brushing soil from his shell. "You are growing old now," said the snail. "Soon your time will be over. You have given the world all you can roses, roses, and more roses. Has it meant anything? I doubt it. You have done nothing to cultivate your inner being. Surely, if you possessed true depth, you would have created something beyond mere petals. What have you to say for yourself?" "You frighten me," whispered the rosebush. I have never thought of such things. Of course you haven't, replied the snail. You never think at all. You bloom because you must not, because you understand why. Have you ever asked yourself what it means to exist, to blossom, to wither? No, said the rosebush softly. I have only lived. The sun was warm, the air pure. I drank the rain and the dew. I felt life rise within me from the soil and descend upon me from the heavens. Joy overflowed in me, and so I bloomed. That is all I know. The snail gave a slow, superior nod. You have indeed lived an easy life. Perhaps, said the rosebush, yet I am thankful for it. And you who think so deeply, surely you will accomplish great things one day, something that will astonish the world. I have no wish to astonish the world, the snail said coldly. The world means nothing to me. I turn inward. I seek truth within myself. Let others concern themselves with giving. But should we not, asked the rosebush, gently offer what we can to others? I give my roses freely. Some wither, some are treasured. One of my blossoms once lay pressed in a mother's hymn book. Another rested upon a maiden's heart as she dreamed her first dream of love. And once a child kissed my petals in delight. Those moments live within me. They were my purpose. Purpose, hissed the snail. Illusion. The world consumes and forgets. Keep your foolish satisfaction. I withdraw from such emptiness. I retire into myself, and there I shall remain. The world is nothing to me. And so he pulled back into his shell and sealed the opening tight. The rosebush sighed softly. Poor creature, she said. I cannot hide within myself. I must keep giving, even when the wind tears at my branches. My roses fall, but sometimes they leave behind a memory, and perhaps that is enough. Years slipped quietly by. The rosebush continued to bloom, each spring scattering beauty as naturally as breathing. The snail lay hidden in his shell, wrapped in the pride of his own thoughts, until one day he too returned to the earth. The rosebush followed not long after, its roots fading back into the soil. Time passed, and in that same garden, new rosebushes rose from the ground. New snails crept among the leaves. The roses filled the air with fragrance, and the snails, each in his turn, declared, "The world means nothing to me." And so it was, and so it will always be. Shall we read the story once more? We might, but it will never change, for in every garden the rose will bloom, the snail will withdraw, and the world will continue exactly exactly as before.